Meet Bilal Zuberi. He has backed over 70 companies shaping our physical world.
What is the actual problem you're trying to solve?
Get to revenue. Be in control of your own destiny.
You have to believe before others even understand.
Not everyone's aware of this, the power of AI in the physical world. So for our listeners, just tease that apart. What does it mean?
Now, where we're headed towards is what I call physical AI, actually. I call it AI in the physical world. Jensen Huang and NVIDIA in January called it physical AI, which is embedded AI, which is in physical objects around us, whether it's it's a machine, it's a robot, it's a autonomous car, the embedded environment in which we have things around us. What if intelligence is embedded inside? And that's where I'm investing, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But let me say something that actually comes before that. So we talked about how, 30 years ago, the power of the internet allowed us to have this communication with each other effectively for free. What happened? What is that? It is that the cost of communication asymptotically went to zero. Okay? And what that meant was that a lot of industries that relied on communication barriers, they effectively got commoditized and then developed tremendously in a different way. Right? News. It used to be a bunch of people sitting in a room, writing a newspaper, putting it on paper, printing press, publishing it, the guy coming and throwing it into your door. There's a lot of barriers in that, right? And that changed. You can write, if you get a piece of news, your relative is getting married, you can publish it within seconds on WhatsApp. The entire world knows that, somebody's sister is getting married. That led to changes in communication. We don't write letters anymore. We just send emails to our parents or whoever, right? It changed how we access news. It changed how we do commerce. It changed how we get entertainment. And all that industry has created trillions of dollars of economy for the internet. What is happening now with the AI, the most high-level way to think about this, rather than getting lost in the infrastructure and compute and LLMs and all that stuff, is that the cost of intelligence is asymptotically going to go to zero. Okay? We think we're intelligent beings. I think, therefore I am. That has been reserved to human beings for the longest period of time. That, I think, is going to get automated and mechanized and built into machines. And that's going to create, just like the cost of communication going to zero, tremendous push for the economy. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to accelerate our GDP growth. Not that that's the only thing to care about, but it's going to allow us to solve problems that we couldn't before. We don't have enough doctors in this country. We certainly don't have enough material scientists. I was a chemistry undergrad, physical chemistry graduate student. When was the last time you met a young person coming out of high school who says, I want to do a major in chemistry and I want to be a chemist? It's a dying breed, right? But have we solved all chemistry problems in the world? Hell no, right? But we don't have enough chemists. 40% of all engineers graduating this year worldwide are in China. Right? So if you want to improve the battery system so your cars can run for 1,000 miles instead of 250 or 300, and they cost, $25K instead of $100K to have that. If you want to build the next cardiac, defibrillator, that are embedded inside you. If you want to solve, artificial tissue that's regenerated, so skin replacements or organ replacements, and I can go on and on. How are you going to do that? You need scientists to do that. And the point is that we are going to get to a place where we will do the smart, intelligent stuff on top. Humans are going to be in the loop, hopefully always. But the point is that a lot of tasks we do on a daily basis, download this paper, read this paper, analyze this paper, figure out the experimental methodology, see how you do that, learn from it. A lot of faculty time is spent reading papers, right? Of what is being published around the world, what new things are being done, and how are people approaching problems. All of that's going to get mechanized. All of that's going to be done in machines, and that's going to really accelerate. That's the real power. Now, how does all this connect to the world where I'm spending most of my time, which is a lot of people in venture and startups are right now taking what we built over the last 10 years as SaaS solutions, things that are like search and customer service and legal and all of that. And they're basically saying, how can we use AI to automate those functions? And there's a lot of economic opportunity there. So it's like traditional enterprise software that's being, AI-ified. Let's put it that way. Great. I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity, and we will see amazing companies come out of that. But I think the other thing that's happening is AI is pervading every single aspect of our life and every single aspect of our GDP and economy. Vast swaths of our economy are run by things like industrialization, manufacturing, automotive, construction, healthcare, defense tech, right? And we're in a global competition, and we've frankly been struggling to keep up. Right? We've lost our, solar cell manufacturing capacity, semiconductor manufacturing capacity. We have significant issues. We don't manufacture things anymore. How are we going to bring all that back? How are we going to create the next generation of these systems? We're going to do that with the help of AI. And I think this is the promise, that AI can now enable all these companies that previously were not able to do that, to build amazing companies. The last part of this is, 10 years ago, if you wanted to solve something in automotive industry, your father grew up in Michigan and you really care about American, independence in automotive, you had to build a car company. And in fact, every major VC firm 8 to 10 years ago had either an automotive or a truck company in its portfolio. The founders of that largely came from the automotive industry, learning new tools and tricks to be able to do that. You're a doctor and you say, I've done a little bit of technology. Let me start building a medical device company, right? Today, that is going to change, because now young kids, my children, your children, who want to go do software engineering, they work at OpenAI, DeepMind, Palantir, Samsara, Flock Safety, Applied Intuition, all these software companies, Silicon Valley-esque companies, they can be inspired to solve problems in the real world, because you no longer have to be sourcing doors and panels in China to be able to build the next car, but you can take these magical tool sets that you've got around AI and software, and you can use that to influence important problems in the world. You can use that to create ways of diagnosing cancer using radiation scans, or to build autonomous systems for driving or elderly care or home robots. That, I think, is amazing. So you combine this incredible technology and this innovative mindset that's usually been building video games or whatnot, and now you can solve really interesting problems, and that's a real bonus for society. And I want to invest at that intersection.
I 100% agree with you. You're in the physical AI world, so transformation of physical industries, which, by the way, is an area we started investing in 2018. We're not 100% focused like you, but at least a third of each of our funds go into the transformation of physical industries. The way I see it, the power of AI is the biggest in the most rustic industries, right? Because the order of magnitude of transformation there is so much bigger that the return on capital there is going to be so much bigger than the incremental gains in the digital world. That's a vast market, right? You have construction, you have oil and gas, you have automotive, you have vast amounts of industries. Is the fund focused on a particular couple of areas, and all of it? Just tease that apart a little bit. Where are you focusing your time?
So this is a question that I've been asked for 16 years of investing. Where are you focused? I'm focused where the founders are focused. And I'm not being glib about it. If I had done the, Bilal Zuberi, the analyst, napkin approach, these are the sectors that are going to grow over the next 5 years. And actually famously, Bill Joy at Kleiner Perkins did that. I'd probably be out of business right now. We were all investing 2008. Clean tech was the big thing, right? Before that, it was nanotech. Before that, it was biotech. Then came crypto and now it's deep tech, right? Like it's building defense companies or whatnot. I mean, these cycles come and go. I mean, they're funds that got created in the last 10 years. They're like space-focused funds that are just automotive-focused funds. And my thing is, it doesn't matter what I want to focus on. What really matters is where the founder is seeing the opportunity. Right? These founders are not just some, they're not just some people who take risks. These are people that have deep insights into industries and transformations that are happening. Mike Maples has written a very interesting book called Pattern Breakers that came out maybe a year ago. And then Mike Maples talks very interestingly about, who are these people that see inflection in society. Something is happening, usually technologically, sometimes it's politically, but something is happening that's going to lead to completely new ways of solving problems. An example he gives is like the availability of GPS on the iPhone 4. All of us looked at it, oh yeah, great, we have GPS now. But some founders of Lyft and Uber looked at it and said, if you have a GPS, we know exactly where you are at any given time. If I have a GPS, I know exactly where I am at any given time. Hey, I can connect the two of us and voila. You can start creating transportation. You can do Uber, Lyft, but then you can also do DoorDash, Instacart, and all that good stuff, right? And it completely changed the world in many ways how we think about mobility. So that's what I look for in terms of spaces. Okay, that said, so now back up a little bit. what is happening in the physical world? Number one, people vastly underestimate the size of these markets. The entire software industry globally is about $4 trillion. Just the automotive industry is a $4 trillion market. Right? Now, you drive a car, you've probably driven a car most of your life. I drive cars, and can you name me one software-focused company in the automotive industry? It's going to be
Blind intuition.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Look, here's the problem. The largest company in Applied Intuition, the largest company that was doing software revenues at that time was a company called Bosch. Mm-hmm. And you don't think of Bosch as a software company, right? Yep. So this is a ginormous industry. There is software we all use all the time. You sit in a car, you turn the car on, and a whole bunch of software comes on, and screens come on, and buttons press, and music, and connect to Spotify, and all that stuff, right? And there's literally, in my opinion, relatively, compared to what we're used to in Silicon Valley built products, like relatively not very good companies building software for the automotive companies. And yet, few founders in the past would venture into that space. And I think that's changing, and it's going to lead to amazing opportunities.
I can see why founders should be partnering with you. I think you're going to push them to the right direction. They have their vision. They're bringing a lot to the table. You're also building all your experience and wisdom to the table. And what I heard is practicality. Get to revenue. Be in control of your own destiny for the companies that you're backing, right? So I think they're going to have a very pragmatic, experienced partner at the table that's going to push them longer and harder to go further to succeed, right? So great job. Can you give us some examples? Have you invested? Have you activated the fund? Have you...
Yeah. So
give us a few examples of early investments. If they're in stealth, you don't need to tell us the name.
No. So I'll tell you, a couple of companies. So first, I was in the early investor Series A co-lead of a company that just got bought for $1 billion by Mitsubishi Electric in Industrial Cybersecurity.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That entire field got created with Stuxnet, which was U.S. and Israel creating ways to disrupt the nuclear ambitions of Iran, and we did that using cyber invasion and whatnot, and that led to others saying, "Oh my God, we can do that too." So utilities in Europe got under threat, and manufacturing plants, and all kinds of stuff. So this company was built. There was a series of companies that got started 8 to 10 years ago, and they're all reached a certain level of maturity. The most important thing you do there is understand anomalies in, who's on your network. So who's even in those industrial networks operating, what machines are there. So discovering them and understanding them, and knowing that you have a Windows NT machine that hasn't been security updated for 10 years and has a real vulnerability, right? Like you don't need, if that machine is found on your network, that's a, hole through which, trucks can go through. So, before you go to very sophisticated cybersecurity regimens. So that's what that company did. But now I've invested in another company that's formation stage, just getting started, 2 incredible engineers that came out of the kinds of companies that represent software companies in Silicon Valley. And they're saying the same thing is now happening, but it's also happening even in air-gapped environments. Think of aerospace, defense, and others, where you really don't have much systems on the network. You have an F-35, but you also have, a manufacturing facility that's building drones for the U.S. military, or armaments, or building the next-gen satellites or buses for satellite communications. And now you have to take the technology further, which is not only anomalies in the system and the operating conditions, but also looking at, the code that's going in is AI-generated code, the system, policies that you're implementing, the configuration files that you're uploading, and you have to go much deeper into the meat of the situations and look for cybersecurity loopholes and shut them. This is an example of a company which is an execution machine. Like, there's no vision needed. Like, you're not saying the world doesn't. Everybody knows this is a problem, but nobody knew how to solve that problem, or they were using old school technologies to do that. So that's what this is doing. And a second company in stealth, which is both these companies are in stealth, but the second company is effectively saying that we are very quickly moving from an Uber system where you had a driver, and remember, you used to comment on the driver and have conversations with the driver, where you from, what do you do, and all those nice things, to now the cars are all electric. I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of Ubers are Teslas, and so you have to optimize for that. The driver doesn't need to just figure out, maybe I should hang around the airport or this kind of clubbing scene after 2 a.m. so I can pick up people who are drunk and will give me high tips or whatever, right? Or maybe not, because they're obnoxious. Now you also have to optimize for when should I charge my car? Like when should I clean my car? What do I do? And towards autonomous systems, you go on Uber in Austin, you can call a Waymo, right? Where there's no driver, nothing. So how do you create optimization of these kinds of vehicles on ride sharing networks? And what is the sort of stuff that you need to do to turn that into fleets and turn that into managed fleets? And so like very interesting work happening in ride sharing. So I've invested in that as well. A company I invested in a few years ago that I also invested in with Red Glass, but it's an exception. This is a company I invested in at 5 million post 3.5 years ago. I mean, that unheard of, right? But it was a real partnership between me and the founder, and long story how we did that and the structure to it. And it was very interesting. Another day and all that. But it was really a partnership to say, let's go build this. This is important. And it was a, data aggregation analysis and visualization and tools for data coming out of hardware testing. Defense applications, military applications, industrial applications, manufacturing applications, and so on. That company is growing, building products to allow you, when a car used to get built every 6-7 years. Now we do a car every, 3 years, a new version. Spaceships used to go up. NASA rockets would go up every year, 2 years, right? Now we have a rocket going up every day, right? And new satellites and new communication things. And, people are building now data centers in space and all kinds of stuff. That hardware iteration cycle has sped up. So this company is providing technologies for that. That company now just raised money 3.5 years later at like a 500 million post, led by Sequoia and Lightspeed and General Catalyst and Founders Fund and Lux. It's like a consensus round now. But that's an example of partnering up with.
What's the name of the company?
It's called Nomina.
Sorry. Oh, this is Nomina. Yes.
And this is an example of, I use that as an example to say founders at the early stages, they should be looking for, whether they come to me or not, it doesn't matter, but you should be looking for investors who will become real partners to them.
A true partner to the founders with a lot of experience who will be building right alongside the founders, right? So will you do hardware? The 3 examples you gave me were software examples. So will you invest in hardware?
I will invest in hardware, but the way to think about hardware is that though there is no hardware without software today, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to invest in hardware that's either software inspired or software enabled. So, if somebody comes to me and says, I'm just building a battery and I need to build these kind of anodes or cathodes or whatever, that's not the right fit for me. I want to see where AI intersects with the physical world. So if you have, solution, I mean, there's a lot of companies now, but AI-enabled materials discovery companies, that would be an interesting place. And, human knowledge aggregation and using that to build the next generation hardware, 3D printing or 3D design, generative. We build everything that we have. This cup looks a certain shape and size because somebody who's designed this started with a flat sheet of paper and said, let me put a cylinder. It's easy to do. Let me put an attachment to it. Easy to do. So it all has a shape. But this is not an ergonomic fit. I've yet to find a cup where my fingers exactly fit right. And, and we've been baking cups for millennia, like for entire life. And we still can't figure out the ergonomic fit to it. And the reasoning is that we're using Cartesian coordinates to be able to do this. Maybe if we built it using AI to say, what does human ergonomics really feel like? This thing will not look like this. This may be 3D printed in real time to fit my hand just perfect because I want to have 3 fingers in here, not 2, and I can't fit 3 fingers in here, right? That, if you start thinking product solutions that way, starts to look very interesting. Absolutely will invest in that. And, and we really do need hardware because at the end of the day, we don't just sell bits and bytes to each other, right? Like we need things to actually do things for us. Right? A car still has to drive us from point A to point B. Maybe one day we'll get teleported. But in which case there will be radiations that will be all around us. They'll be teleporting us, right? Ionizing our existence. But even then we need hardware, but it needs to be intelligent hardware. It needs to be hardware done in a way that fits the venture model. Like doing hardware for the sake of hardware is not venture.
Well, I think the founders listening to this show will get to know you at a deeper level and they should be partnering with you. We should also mention that we are recording this on a Sunday. This is Sunday morning for you. And you told me you have a full day ahead with your portfolio company. So you are an investor that'll be right by their side, working alongside them, pushing them to achieve their goals. Just love it. Thank you for doing this for me today, taking time out on a busy Sunday morning. Wishing you many, many, many more funds ahead of you and lots and lots of successes with your portfolio companies. Thank you, Bilal.
Thank you so much. So good to talk to you.